so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads. Welcome to a very special episode dedicated to none other than you, the P-heads themselves. I am your P-head enthusiast and hostess for the day, Alexa Hauser. I have been blessed to have the experience of helping out with Positive Head social media for the better part of a year. And through my digital interactions, I began to realize, as did Brandon, that we have some incredible beings listening to this show who are taking the information that Brandon puts out through the podcast and using it to transform their lives and create wonderful things. You listeners are all a huge, huge part of the life force that propels this show forward through time and space, and we think it's time to bring forth some of you beautiful reflections and delve a little deeper into this collection of energy that is the Positive Head community. So as we shine the spotlight on our listeners, what we'll have them do is share their stories of how they attracted Positive Head into their life, the transformation it's facilitated for them, and what they're focused on creating now that they're in a more positive headspace. Also, this episode of the Positive Head podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Hello, all you positive heads. On this week's P-Head Posse episode, our guest is Positive Head listener Shae LeighlandPence. Shae is a creative explorer of consciousness, an intuitive and artisan. She's a writer and poet under the pen name C.E. Lane, a painter, photographer, and jewelry designer with a background in web design. She's been a soldier, a fire eater, and a student of life. She's been called to teach certain things learned and experienced on her own path as she also continues to be the eternal student. Hi, Shae. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Alexa. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this since we first connected about, when was that? A week ago?
Yeah, about that.
Ago? Yeah. So I'll have you, tell your whole story in a minute, but just to kick this off, Shae and I actually connected in this very amazing way, very mystical way, where I guess the first time you wrote a message was, I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month ago. Is that right?
Something like that. Time's kind of abstract.
Yeah, that's so true. Time just blends together for me. But so about a month ago, I was tagged in a Facebook post, and Shae wrote me this she was like, Alexa Hauser, I have a message for you. And it was a very long, detailed message, which was so mystical and magical and was basically all these answers to these questions that I'd been asking, and it was amazing. And then about a week ago or so, the same thing happened. Shae wrote me another message, and it was all filled with these processes of ways that I could, practice, like bringing the merging, what were you saying, like 5D with 4D or 5D with 3D?
I call it parallel processing, but
yes,
you can name it a bunch of things.
Well, we'll have to talk about parallel processing because I want you to share what you were sharing with me because it's really interesting. But Shae basically was like channeling messages for me, and so I finally messaged her and was like, "What's going on?" And we talked, and she channeled a lot more essentially, and helped me understand my purpose and helped me understand a lot of things that I had questions to. So it was this really amazing coming together. And at that moment, I was like, oh, you've got to be on the P-Head Posse. You have so much wisdom to share. So that's my little intro to Shae's intro. So Shae, with that little intro, do you want to tell us, about yourself and your history and how you came to be where you are?
Before I go down that rabbit hole,
Sure.
I think the important thing that I'm trying to say to everybody, and it's something that I had to learn for myself, is that we each have an internal experience that really matters a lot more than we think it does. And everybody has these gifts and the ability to orchestrate these things in their lives, and everybody has things that are relevant for people. I mean, we spend so much time sitting in our own shadow, kind of dealing with all those self-doubt issues and, fear of speaking up for a variety of different reasons. Usually it's kind of a stew of stuff,
Yeah.
And it's not so much, I mean, we all have different stories of how we got to where we are, but it's not really the story that matters as much as what we got from it that puts us where we are, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, I mean, it would even be hard to try and translate that to somebody else, because it really is an internal experience, even while we're still focused on all that we think is external, and we're jumping through all these hoops and going through that part of the experience, which is part of the experience. I mean, it's not something to look down on. And that's another thing I think we struggle with when we get to this place in a path of awakening, where we want to shake everybody and say, wake up, don't you know what you can do,
Yeah, totally.
And because you really do want everybody to have that, and it's this amazing thing. But if somebody's not ready to hear it, it's just because they're going through that other part of the process that's just as relevant and beautiful in its own way, and sometimes just taking a minute to remember that, because I have a hard time with that part still.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I think we all do at different points in time, which is why when, we connect with someone in, like, for me, the way that you and I connected, it's so powerful, because you realize that, like, you are in the right place at the right time, ready to receive a message or give a message that is ready to be received. Right.
Right.
And that
Exactly.
feels so resonant when that happens.
And part of the growth piece for that is to be able to do that. We have to overcome our self-doubts and meet ourselves internally and become that. So in giving the message to somebody else, you're also growing and getting the things you need at the same time. And Absolutely. They probably have a message for you too. So it's really very elegant when you see how it all is working, which is just amazing to sit in the middle of it and look and say, wow, I get it. This all makes sense now. And really pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and so actually, I mean, now that we're talking about it, we might as well go into it a little bit, because, one of the things that when Shae and I finally connected offline and we're, going back and forth, I was like asking her, I was like, so what's the deal? Are you just like straight channeling, or like what's happening? And she was like, and she gave me a little bit of stuff that she's been through recently, things that have opened her up, and was essentially saying, yeah, like what were you saying? Like I ask questions and I get answers, about other people. Oh no, I think what you said was, you said something like, well, I'm clairsentient. And I was about to write back and say, I think I'm clairsentient too. And you were like, and I think you are too. And I was like, how do you know that? And you were like, because I've been told that. And I was like, by who? And you were like, by
everything.
Yeah.
Because that inner voice is the voice of everything. I mean, it's the place where we all are connected. Whatever metaphors we use to understand that, it doesn't really matter how we describe it. Only reason we're describing it is to try and talk about it in ways that make sense to each other. But ultimately, it is all the same thing. Mm. And very recently, I went on an immersive experience with Tom Campbell, who did the My Big Toe, which is his theory of everything, which is fascinating. I'm sure most of the listeners would really, really love going down that rabbit hole, because it parallels a lot of everything else that's talked about on this show and things we each are exploring individually. Yeah. But when I was on that experience, I went there with my personal quest of, I know I have this purpose, and it's like right on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite grasp it, Mm-hmm. And I wanted that direction. And I also wanted to be more inner directed. I wanted to learn, well, what does that mean? How do I do that? And boy, did I get the answers to that. in ways that are still unfolding for me. It was just such a powerful experience. And one of the biggest realizations I had was you've already always been doing all this stuff. You just didn't know it. It happens all the time for everybody by default. And it's that transition when you're awakening, what you're realizing is what it is that's all going on starts to make sense. And you realize, well, wait, I don't have to do this on default. I can actually choose how to do this. And another aspect of that is treating the inner experience as valid and real, that it's the gateway to the external experience. You can't, there kind of is no objective reality because we each see it subjectively.
Right.
So if you look at 7 billion plus people on the planet, there's 7 billion plus universes right there constantly changing based on that person's subjective place. Right. So if you want to sort of chase a rabbit hole of that's one interpretation of multiple realities right there, where you can say, yeah, I can totally see that that's a thing.
Yeah.
But, so we're all trying to find a consensus reality. And this is where people run into trouble because it looks different to everybody, and trying to agree on what that is, it is hard enough. It's a little easier if you can agree everybody is subjective and you're trying to find a meeting place. It's easier to do that with people who have that awareness than when somebody is still in the default kind of reacting to everything, if that makes sense.
Yep. Definitely.
But while I was in this experience, is what it is as Tom teaches you remote viewing and healing and telepathy and all of these things, and it's all one thing. All of they're not actually different skills. They're just different metaphors, different ways of interacting with consciousness, because it's all coming from consciousness, because that's what everything is.
Right.
And your your imagination space, which is kind of stamped out of us very early, that's a very powerful tool to use to interact with consciousness. And we tend to invalidate ourselves so much that it's just a matter of us getting out of our own way, and everybody can do all this stuff.
Yeah. Speak more on that, because that's something that I think you imprinted on me pretty powerfully when we were talking about reminding me of the power of our imagination. And that's where the parallel processing thing comes in. So speak more on that if you can, because I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's kind of my total passion right now. When I had this like secondary awakening within the awakening of understanding how powerful in space, because it's an aspect of, I think, of personal or practice things, work through my own stuff, just have fun. If I because you can just play. You can it's a gateway to things like remote view, learning how to language. Consciousness doesn't speak English or Spanish, or it's a language of kind of that instantaneous knowing of something that is what we call clairsentience. That's kind of how it communicates. And sometimes there will be images or just like a quick flash of something. I mean, it can be audible. It can be anything that you interpret, and it's going to be different for everybody. But one way to get good at speaking that language is in that imagination space, and freeing that up and realizing how valid it is, that it is its own reality that belongs to you. That's your gateway to it, that's solely yours, and everybody's is a little different. Being able to really embrace that is a huge accelerant for being able to learn that language very quickly and get those experiences, things like out of body. It's not that you're actually going anywhere. All of the, when somebody finds themselves on a ceiling, what that is it's a metaphor explaining to them that they're taking this journey. Everything we experience is some kind of metaphor. And being able to interpret those metaphors very quickly without needing to necessarily put words to it or explain it to ourselves or get our ego intellect in the way, because that's what people who study remote viewing have to do in order to get good at it. They have to get their, the second that question comes up, is this real? Bam, you're out of it. And And I've heard a lot of people say that in different ways when they're having an experience. And the minute they go, whoa, wait a second, is that real? That's when they snap, snap right back out of it. And that's why it's that questioning, it's that doubt. And when you really embrace that imagination space, you overcome that kind of doubt and you get familiar with operating in that space. And where parallel processing comes into it is you can hold your subjective reality in one hand and kind of what appears to be consensus reality in the other. You can participate in both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, it's hard to describe what this experience is like, which is where this set of practices that I ended up, it was the way that was received to me to teach myself how to better do it. And, that same inner voice said, you need to, pick this apart, analyze it, and give it to people so they can play with it and teach you back more things. Because everybody, if you give somebody something like that, they'll give you something back that adds to you. So it's really a very sharing, where everybody, the rising tide does lift all boats. It's really cool that way.
Yeah.
But it's experiencing your own subjective imagination space on top of reality, not competing with it. Like you totally see both things independently, but they're sort of overlapped, and you can just have a lot more fun engaging in consensus reality through that channel, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's so abstract, it's very hard to put words into. And the more you speak this abstract language, it can get a little challenging to try and reinterpret that in English.
Well,
you get used to speaking the one instead of the other, and you go, okay, wait a second, what's a good metaphor for this?
Yeah. Well, I think, if you want to share maybe like some of the processes you gave me, like the dancing one, I think is a good way for people to understand it, because that really helped me understand it.
Yeah. I guess one way to separate, because it's sort of like there's a progression here that's easier,
Okay.
But with that one part of it, everybody's experienced, like if you're listening to music and you're having a daydream where you're, jamming out, you're in your own little rock video and, that's your zone. That's a part of your imagination space. And you can use that to, like within a meditation, you can put yourself in that meditation sort of semi-trance state, which is very easy to do. You can, and one quick way to do that for people who struggle with meditation, you can put your palm about 2 feet from your face and look at the lines in your palm and just kind of tell yourself, relax, take a couple of deep breaths and let the lines in your palm sort of go blurry. Let your eyes defocus. Mm-hmm. That's it. You're there. That's it. That is a light trance state, the same as in hypnosis or meditation or and it's that easy. And we do it all the time. We just don't know we're doing it.
Right. Is that what's happening when this just popped in my head? Ever since I was little, there will be these like random moments and they come out of nowhere where suddenly my eyes are like looking at something, but my brain is like, it's like something is turning off or something. It's like I keep staring at something and suddenly I become conscious that I'm staring and I'm like, why am I staring? Mm-hmm. And I'm having that dialogue, but I keep staring and it feels like I'm fixed on this point in space.
Yes.
Is that what that is?
That's exactly what that is. And
why does that happen?
Some people will call it, well, it's a natural thing to happen. You're kind of switching channels. You're receiving a different part of your own data stream. You're tuned into one specific thing that's compelling to you.
Right.
It's a total do. People dissociating, which you can dissociate to the point where you're just totally absorbed in that anything else. So the volume kind of like if you had an equalizer and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to keep both channels kind of in balance so I can be doing the ecstatic dance thing in my mind. I'm doing my rock video, but I'm also driving down the road and actually paying attention. Your reflexes really can get a lot faster. You can be more present when you practice this enough. It's really weird. So, I've heard a lot of, I went through a lot of trauma in my life. So dissociation was one of the ways that I kind of dealt with that. So I got good at that, but I had to learn how to bring that back into being present in my body, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, and I ended up kind of teaching myself to do both, partly as a way of overcoming the tendency to dissociate, where it was disengaging me from life rather than being able to do all the things I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So that was just kind of my own teaching myself how to get past that kind of speed bump that was getting in my way of doing a lot of the things I wanted to do. And at first I thought that meant, well, I just have to stop dissociating. But you can't just stop dissociating, because we all do that naturally. You can't just shut down one whole aspect of your experience and think that's going to work, because it doesn't.
Right.
So I came up with, okay, well, if I can't stop that, I'm going to treat it the same way I do my sound meditation, which was the first part that I gave you in that. I can't remember if it was the second or third message. They all run together. But what I had started doing, I had been very ill at one point, where it got so bad I could barely walk across my bedroom. It was just really very, and that can be a very dark place to be, the dark night of the soul kind of an experience. And I started just focusing on any little positive thing. If I could look at a flower for 5 minutes and just appreciate that, then okay. And it was just grabbing for positive things like that. And I started meditating again, and just sort of naturally, I didn't plan it or understand what I was doing at the time, but I would listen to a sound like a bird singing and focus just on that and let everything fade into the distance. And then I would kind of bring the volume back up on everything else, but I'm still holding on to that bird sound. I'm still focusing on that, but I'm noticing the background more and more. And then I'll pick a second sound like a cricket or whatever, a dishwasher in the background, whatever it is, and then turn the gain back down on everything else except those two sounds, and practicing just holding both of those in my attention. And then, bring the background back up and pick a third sound, and just practicing that kind of thing, adding and subtracting sounds. And you can do that with bodily sensations, sense, visuals, whichever. Sound is probably the easiest to start with. But whichever thing you start with, you can add in other senses the same way. Like you can add in the feeling of motion, or you can add in visuals from your imagination space or whatever it is. And it gives you a lot of control over how you orchestrate your focus and your attention. And you can kind of split it off into different things. The best metaphor I had for myself for this was picturing yourself as kind of the conductor of your own symphony. So you're instead of just playing one instrument at a time or looking at one piece, you're kind of working with this whole of it, and you're picking which elements you want to highlight at which different times for which different reasons, which is really fun to do. And it has a lot of practical applications in life at the same time. And when you start doing this for a little while, you start realizing that your imagination space naturally overlaps onto other things you're doing. And you just naturally start parallel processing, because it's part of what we naturally can do. It's just when we're little and all of those, all that fire of imagination gets sort of stamped out of us as that's not relevant. It's not important. You're supposed to go, work a job for 50 years, retire, and then maybe you'll be happy. That's pointless, but that's what we're all indoctrinated with. Yeah. And, I think that's the very thing a lot of us are trying to change by demonstrating something different as possible. But, turning all that back on so that you still have all of the knowledge you've acquired up till that point, but you get back that childlike sort of engagement, the curiosity, the wonder of things, and just enjoying whatever it is that's going on. And that's a really neat place to conduct your life from that feeling space of just the wonder of it all and just playing with it.
Yeah, definitely. And it also, I mean, that's super powerful. And I that reminds me, or it gives me the visual of the way that, like, you know, filters have become such a big part of our culture, like with images, with video, with photos. And it's like, in recent months, I'd say I've started to become more aware that, I mean, that is a direct metaphor for what we do in our lives. Like, we put all kinds of filters all over everything. Like, everything is filtered.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that happens by default until we realize, wait a second, I can select my filters. I can, you know, I can overlay what I, you know, want. And that's the power of creation. You know, when we want to manifest things, that imagination space of envisioning what can be and overlaying that, it's not that you're denying whatever consensus reality looks like, and there are problems and things that go on around you, but you can hold that, you know, you can get yourself into that high flying state of really enjoying the creation of your vision and hold that on top of what's there and allow them both to be there. And it gives you a different kind of room to experience all of it as something that's unfolding. You know, you sort of see where it's going and you see where it is, and there's nothing wrong with either one. And there's a kind of a space of peace in that, where you realize that all these things do sort of flow together and they really are going where your vision is. And you learn to trust in all of that intuitive process. You get it confirmed all the time. The more you dive into it, the more you get those synchronicities and those confirmations. And you'll think a thought, and then you'll hear somebody else say something nearly identical, and it's like, wow, you know, holy crap!
Oh,
and that happens more and more and more and more, and it's a very cool experience. And I think an important aspect of that is all of us coming together in ways like this to validate that experience and to see what things we can create together from that mutual experience.
Totally. You know, what something that popped up for me when you were talking about everything flowing together, and just now when you were mentioning essentially co-creating things. This weekend, I was in Rhode Island and was with a few friends and my partner, and we were we had this great weekend, and we went out on this boat that we were going to go water skiing on. And so my partner was going first, and he decided to bring his, so I didn't bring my sunglasses out because I specifically was like, I don't want to lose them. I don't want to forget about them. My partner went out, brought his sunglasses, and right when he went to jump off the boat, he gave them to me and put them on my face and was like, here, wear them while I'm in the water. And I guess they were so lightweight that I just completely forgot that they were like, I didn't think about bringing sunglasses out there. And I guess I just forgot they were on my face, which is not normal for me.
I've experienced that.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty conscious of where things are usually,
right.
but I don't know why. And then while he was getting out of the water, they were like, all right, you're up, like, get up, like, start jumping in. And I was like really focused on jumping in the water. So I jump in the water, and anyway, long story short, like, I had to actually get out because something broke with the water ski. But right when I got out and we had started driving away in the boat, he's like, where are my sunglasses? And I was like, what? And it was like something in my, I felt like I was missing a chunk of time because I was like, hold on, how is this possible? Like, I didn't feel them on my face at all. Anyway, the point of the story is, as I got out, suddenly I had this, it was like something of, I don't know if it was a voice or it was just a sudden a knowing. It was suddenly like, and that is how co-creation works. And I was like, what do you mean? And the voice was like, well, you were feeling off and on this weekend, partly unworthy, just things that you were thinking about that had nothing, you know, that partly were relevant to this and partly weren't. You were just thinking of other things, and you were kind of having this like unworthy feeling going on. And he is very like, he had already lost something that weekend, like something, and he doesn't like to lose things. So, and he had that going on. And so together, that's what you created together. You came together to create that. That is the path of least resistance with what you both had going on. And
that's absolutely true.
It illustrated that to me in a way that I could really understand how we co-create, because it's like we are drawn together by the path of least resistance in what we each have going on. So it's like, whether that's in a good way or a bad way, in this way, it was somewhat negative experience, but it really helped me understand how it could be used in a great experience, in a great way. Like,
which kind of takes the negativity out of it when you get a cool gift of knowledge from it. It's like, okay, well, that wasn't bad.
Absolutely. And I got over it much quicker than I get over most things. Like, I don't like losing things. So yeah, I don't know why that just popped up when you were talking about things flowing together and co-creating. And
well, it is very relevant because that's a good example of things that happen all the time without us even noticing it. I mean, we really do create and co-create things all the time. It's just we don't. Until we start becoming aware of it and start asking ourselves, how am I doing this? How are we doing this? How does this work? Because once you start understanding how it works, you can do things intentionally that get you results you like a lot better. That's a bonus. But, when you look back over your past story with that understanding, it looks a whole different way, and you realize, oh, okay, it just starts to make sense. And things that were very painful to go through while you were in it without understanding that, you realize, wait a second, there was like this huge wisdom of knowledge hidden in that, and I wouldn't be understanding this and have this peace and power right now if I had not gone through all of these things, if they were all required to get here.
Yeah. Which
is why that's the thing I remind myself of when I get that feeling of wanting to shake somebody and say, come play over here where it's fun,
Yeah.
That it's okay for them to be wherever they are, because that's, whatever pieces they need to collect. It's kind of like in a video game at different levels. You have all these different things you have to go do and pieces you have to collect and all of this to get to that next level. Well, that is kind of a good metaphor for what we are doing here. I mean, and we each have our own little missions in that. And you can't just because I might complete one thing and I go on to this other part of the journey doesn't mean that whatever the other person is doing is wrong. They're doing exactly what they need to do to get where they need to be. And it can be really hard to remember that, even though it can you can still find yourself really wanting. But I want you to come have fun with me.
Yeah.
And that can be that's its own lesson. Learning to just let those things be is, I think, tricky for a lot of us.
Definitely. And just like a few seconds ago, you mentioned going through, realizing later, like after you go through something, that there's, there was something there for you, and something that was very painful actually becomes, it reminds me of like your triggers or your treasures, and
exactly.
And just to speak on that super quick, right before we got on here, I've basically spent all morning. I woke up and had this thought in my mind today. I was like, today is the day that you need to tap on. I had in my head that I had to lead myself on a tap of something that I really did not want to deal with, which is something that I haven't wanted to deal with for years, which is debt that I have. And it's the one thing that, like, when I think about it, it just knots my stomach up a billion times. It just makes me feel like, I don't know, there's just something very, just a lot of resistance there. And so anyway, I tapped on this thing, and essentially, like, I haven't been wanting to deal with this debt and I've essentially been refusing to accept responsibility for the debt in different ways, because I had this belief that, well, if I accept the debt and I accept responsibility for it, then what if I'm not able to handle it or take care of it? Or what if it's, all this, I don't know how to deal
I totally get you.
Yeah.
Totally understand.
And so I tapped on it and I came up, first of all of these realizations came up of like where that feeling originated in another situation when I was younger, how this has actually been going on a lot longer than just now, et cetera, et cetera. But what was really interesting to me was something else popped up that said, it's possible that stepping up to the plate and actually saying it is my intention to settle this debt, to pay this back, and to take responsibility for this, like to say, okay, this is mine, right? And I'm going to do something about it, is actually the key that unlocks the codes that allow you to see the solution. Because up until today, I've been saying I'm not dealing with this. It's not like, I don't even think I should have to pay it. Like essentially rejecting the responsibility. And therefore no solution could ever come from that, because I'm not even willing to say that I have a question that I need an answer to, you know?
Exactly. That's very true.
Yeah. And so
I think that same thing happens in so many different ways with whatever we're having resistance to, whatever that thing is. What you're describing is pretty accurate, I think, in all of those situations. Definitely.
Absolutely. It's an overarching, it's a principle that can be applied to anything, but I think it's, you know, when we have these things that we think is like the worst thing that's happening to us, or something we can't even deal with or can't even look at, it's like, that's what's perpetuating it. And actually, you know, going along with like your triggers or your treasures, that's what that means. It's like something that's triggering you means that there's a huge treasure there for you. There's a lot of energy there that you've been putting towards that thing that can be freed up to solve that thing, if you will say, like, if you will step up to it and set the intention to resolve it or whatever.
And the cool thing is when you practice doing that and meet your triggers and look for the treasure, something really cool happens when you see that result frequently enough, and it becomes a reality to you that there really is a treasure consistently every time.
Yeah.
You start realizing that you get triggered about something, and before you even had a chance to dive into the negative feelings, you're excited because, oh, where's the treasure?
Yeah.
And it's like not even, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And when you get to that place, I think what that signifies is that you've been doing enough of that work where the triggers are less big, less deep, and you've really transmuted a lot of the things that you needed to operate on a whole new level, and that's a pretty cool place to be. And it's also a place where you're not resisting, that it's totally okay for a trigger to show up, and when you're willing to feel whatever it is, and that's totally fine, because you know there's a good in it, you know it's for you. There's nothing to resist, and there's nothing to dread, and whatever happens next is okay, because you trust yourself to do that process. And that is kind of the big piece that overcomes a lot of the self-doubts, because you've done the kind of work that builds a self-reliance and an inner resilience where you know that you have that capability, that it doesn't matter what's going on out there. You can trust yourself to handle the pieces that make the problem and turn the problem into something that's awesome. And that's a pretty cool superpower that we all do have.
Absolutely. And actually, that reminds me, you shared something with me that was pretty powerful, I think, about money and ways to look at our success, which I actually shared with someone today who was talking to me about something similar. I shared it with them, what you said, and they were like, "Oh wow, that's so powerful." Would you mind sharing that here about how you transformed your relationship with money? Do you remember that?
Well, there's a consensus reality story about money being how we value things. And what changed this for me personally was realizing that I could define for myself what success means to me and create my own measuring stick. And for me, that's growth. Because that's kind of why we're all here, is to learn and grow. and become more love and learn things that take us in that direction. So if I'm doing that, it doesn't matter what anything else is. And that's my job in this and all lifetimes. So, when I go wherever else there isn't even money, this is the one thing that's going to still always be true is the growth and becoming more love. So when that became my measuring stick, my relationship with things like money just totally changed, because it doesn't matter. It's a nice tool to have. It's just a symbol for how we exchange. It's a barter system. It's just a thing. It doesn't mean anything unless we give it meaning. And when I took any personal identification out of it and didn't associate it with anything having to do with who I am, or what I'm about, it just started showing up a lot more easily. And I didn't have the same relationship with debt or with earning or any of that. It just sort of became a non-issue. And that's what led me to this piece about how it's not about the money. It's about what we make it mean. Most things are about what we make them mean. So a good question to always ask in any area where we're running our heads against that brick wall and we can't seem to get traction in a thing is, what do I make it mean that I need to get this or have this or do this? Or what do I make it mean if I can't?
Right.
Do I make it mean I'm a failure if I can't achieve X, or if I can't, what is that meaning I'm creating doing to stop me, and how can I rewrite that?
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty powerful when you shared it with me. And while I was in Rhode Island this weekend, I got up early before everyone else was up, and I looked at what you sent me, how you explained it. And then I just was like, okay, well, how can I figure out what success means to me? And I thought immediately of Maslow's human needs. And then I realized Tony Robbins had like a simple little quiz on his website that was actually like pretty helpful. And I took the quiz, and it told me that my major human need, like the overarching need, was connection. And I was like, that is very true. And then it told me that my two values that made that up were growth and contribution. And I was like, yeah, that is very true.
I love that.
Yeah, it felt very true for me. And it explained, if anyone, is interested in doing the same exercise, just Google like Tony Robbins human needs test, I think. And you can take that same quiz, and then you can apply it to what we're saying here, just like I did. But when I then thought about it in terms of those values and in terms of that overarching thing, like, oh yeah, connection, that's what I'm looking for. Like, no matter what I'm doing, it's connection. Like, why do I want money to buy the clothes? Because I want to connect with people based on how I look or something. Why do I want the money to go to events? Because I want to connect with people. Why do I want money to go out to eat? Because I want to go out to eat with people and connect with people. It's like, it makes sense. And then drilling it down to growth and contribution, it's like, it just made it feel so much better to me. And I just really thought that was...
It's a lot lighter.
Yes.
Right. And everything we do is about trying to meet some need. And usually that happens without us even understanding what need we're trying to meet by doing that thing, because it's all just, again, sort of by default until we start waking up to this. And then when you start looking at, okay, well, what is really motivating me to do this? That's really important what you just said, because when you ask yourself better questions like what is it I'm trying to get from going out to eat, or any of those things, any of the things that we find ourselves doing. Once you realize what that piece is, if it's connection, you can go straight for the connection. You don't have to take the detour.
Yeah. Exactly.
You can still have fun with other tools to get there, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's fun to buy clothes. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
but if you're doing it, you can just enjoy doing it and go straight for the connection piece.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, without having to feel like it's dependent on those other things, and that takes a certain pressure off of whatever it is you're doing, because you just cut that whole jumping through hoops stuff out of the equation and own this is the need I'm trying to get met. How do I do that? And just go straight for it.
Definitely. It's the same, it's like Abraham talks about. It's like, instead of trying to do the thing to get to the feeling, just feel the feeling and then everything else will manifest around you. Like we go about it the backwards way. And that's part of it. And another thing I've been talking about on this podcast recently is how like I really, I have been wanting to like stop smoking marijuana at night because it just feels like it makes me tired. It makes me groggy. I don't know, but it's something I keep doing. And just us talking right now, I'm like, oh, that's why I do that for connection. So
yeah, I mean, most of the things and connection is a big need for everybody. It's, I think, one of the biggest needs that we try to get met, and needs can be layered. Like a lot of people will get to the realization of, okay, I'm jumping through these hoops because I want to be successful. Okay, well, success and significance is one of those needs. Why do I need that? Usually it comes back down to connection and feeling accepted and belonging. That's like the main core need that I think drives most people for the other needs. So, and you can, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel significant. It's not, we make it look like a bad thing. Tooting your own horn is selfish and bad. No, it's not. There's nothing, it doesn't have to be. People make it mean that, but it doesn't actually mean anything until we give it a meaning. So playing with meanings and asking yourself better questions about what you make things mean is a very powerful way to change the narration of anything.
Definitely. And, yeah, man, that's powerful. I'm just like soaking that all in right now. So, oh my gosh, I cannot believe time has flown. We have like 15 minutes left, but wow, time flies when I talk to you. So
time flies, it does.
Yeah. Well, so what else do you think would be important? Because you are a fountain of wise information. I feel when I interact with you, and I feel like you're just full of insight. So is there anything specific that you think would be really important for, the other P heads to know and understand as they continue on their own journeys?
I think one of the most important things is really knowing that you do have worth and that your inner experience and the questions that you wrestle with and all of the things that make up both the struggles and the best parts of each of our lives, those matter. And we often look outside of us to validate something as being important or meaningful. And each of us is equally valid. I mean, there is nothing external that can add to that or take away from that. And when we start putting importance on how we feel, what we think, what we want to know, what we want to experience, and start really going inward and having more of an inner experience within the outer experience, instead of letting the world tell us who we should be or what standards that we have to meet. Those are things we each get to decide for ourselves, and everyone should. Nobody. I mean, I can make suggestions to people, but I'm not doing it because they should listen to me. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to really say is listen to yourself, because anything I can do with intuitive stuff, I mean, we all come with those tools. Everybody has that. It's just we don't believe enough in ourselves because of our doubts that are externally placed on us when we're very young. When you go through the 0 to 7 age, you're in that alpha brainwave sort of state where all the information, everything you're exposed to, goes straight into the subconscious. And there's an elegant reason for that, because you have so much to learn in such a short amount of time so that you can function in all the ways you have to without thinking about it, so that you can put your attention on other stuff. It's like learning to drive a car. It's really awkward at first, and then you get to the point where you can have a conversation, drink a drink, and navigate, not think about any of it. That's the same way the 0 to 7 functions. But up till now, we've lived in a world that a lot of what programming we're getting during that time is not very helpful to anybody.
Yeah.
Stories about money doesn't grow on trees and life is a struggle and blah, blah, blah. We get all these little seemingly innocuous bits of data that when you put them all together, it's something we end up having to overcome later.
Yeah.
And that's something I'd like to see change. The more of us become aware of this and find ourselves and our own power and strength, and we can teach something different going forward so that maybe that doesn't have to be such a big part of the journey for other people. But in the meantime, the important piece is that, yeah, I mean, I very much believe in inner direction and autonomy and sovereignty, and nobody needs to put an okay stamp on you. That's something we each need to put our own okay stamp on ourselves. And just because we decided, okay, I'm okay with me, how I am right now, warts, problems, mistakes, all of it is, that's okay. We are all in process. None of us is perfect, and it's totally cool to be where you are. Even if you're in a great big mess, that's still, has beauty in it, because there's treasure in everything. And the biggest treasure is ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something I've personally, and I'm sure a lot of us have really been going through recently, that everything that you're talking about and learning to trust the inner guidance. And, I know for myself, I've gone through a process of, it's like a lot of intuitive people have come into my life very recently. One of which is Ambi, who's been on this show, who I interact with quite frequently. One is you, my writing partner, Marissa, several people.
Actually, it was right after the Ambi episode was what triggered that first message that I sent you.
Oh, was it? That's wild.
Oddly enough.
That's so funny. Yes, it's all connected, like we say. But yeah, like I've come to that understanding that you're talking about, where it's like, even people who are clairvoyant or intuitive or who receive these messages, even if it's about you, it's like, it's guidance, and it's something that you can take in, but you have to evaluate for yourself whether that resonates with you, because everything is really coming through for the person that is receiving, right? And it's like, yes, something like that person can pass that on and other people can benefit from it. But it's not like a solid factual thing, because again, we all have each have our own filters. We all have our own perspectives. And so it's like, so for me, I've been really learning that balance of, having that outer insight, which has been immensely supportive for me and helpful for me to then take that inside and be like, well, which of this feels right and which of this feels true. And it's a delicate balance, and it's tempting to want to put it all external. Like once you start getting answers from people that feel good, that feel like you're getting some answers, it's like, it's so tempting to want to be like, okay, well, tell me this and tell me this and tell me this and tell me this. But
that's true. But you're right. It is that inner resonance that's always got to be the touchstone. That's the compass.
Yes. Because just like, you can be putting out so many different things at different times. People can be picking up different things at different times. And it's like, you kind of have to get steady in your own self and decide what you want to be true. Decide not only what resonates, but what do you want to like be the truth? Because at any moment, any of those readings can change, any of those you can.
That's true.
Yeah.
And all futuristic things are a matter of probabilities in one way or another, no matter what metaphor we use to understand that. It's all, the me that I am right now, the future is some probability, and that can change based on my feelings, my moods, something that comes into my attention, all that can change in an instant. And nobody tell me that, because it's my compass that decides what that is or isn't. And that's true for all of us.
Right.
And getting in touch with that is the part that gives you more. I don't really like the word control, but I'll use it here, because it's not that you're really controlling it, but it gives you more authority over deciding things for yourself.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that tends to, I think, get in our way a lot more than we realize is I think a lot of us had a lot of fear of mistakes, doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, and the judgment that goes with all of that. Totally. But it's less about the outer judgment, really, than it is the inner judgment that goes with the story of the outer judgment. This is sort of like the money thing. If we perceive somebody as disapproving of us, it's not really even about them. It's a reflection of that's how we're feeling about ourselves. But we don't have to do that. It's okay for somebody else not to approve of whatever we're doing because they have their own compass and they need to do what they need to do. It's us that needs to be right with ourselves and accepting of ourselves. And something that helped me to learn to do that was to realize that there are no mistakes. Somebody who's making the most mistakes to me is somebody who's out there trying different things and learning a hell of a lot. And since I value growth, to me, that looks like success. So, you can really reframe a lot of, that there's the story about Thomas Edison, having 1,000 failed light bulbs before he lit up the world. Well, there's a lot of truth in that, and if you keep going, you usually will find what other people identify as success. But along the way, it's everything you learned that is your own success. And it doesn't matter what the actual result is. It's all that learning and what you do with it. It has nothing to do with what happens outside of you. So, looking at it that way, it's just like with the money thing, it does a lot to reframe how we interpret messing up, because you can't mess up. If you're learning something, you're not messing up.
Yeah,
you're doing what you're here to do. Right? That's why we're here.
Yeah.
So it's, that's a peaceful place to sort of, and it gives you a lot more courage to just go for something because you don't fear that mess up. It's like, okay, if I fall on my face and mess up, I'm going to learn something awesome. So that's okay. And you just do it. And you start engaging a lot differently with life from that standpoint. It's a really cool freedom that I certainly would like to see a lot more people have.
Yeah.
And that comes from within them. So don't listen to me, write your own story.
Yeah. Oh, that just inspired me so much. That just got my engines going, just what you said right there, because, it made me even look at this debt thing that I just posted about in the group as, it's something that I've looked at for a long time as oh my God, I failed. It's so scary. Mm-hmm. It's about all this. I'm so bad.
It's all of those meanings. It's the meanings.
Yes,
and most of them originally showed up from the outside, meanings that have been passed down for centuries that other people came up with in some other time and place that we don't even know. And they don't even have anything to do with us when you think about it. So it's starting to let go of those, and it's a process. I mean, the big part is, okay, you have that initial realization. That's this big kind of relief, aha. Then you start practicing it, and because you'll feel kind of smacked back down by it. It's like,
Yeah.
But it takes a little while to rewire the brain to sort of feel into the new meaning you give things, and that is a transition. It takes a little time, and that's okay too.
Yeah,
it happens pretty quickly. And one day you wake up and realize that you've done it.
Yeah. Well, what I was realizing when you were saying all that was, it's this thing that I was looking at as I failed. I did it all wrong. I'm shameful. All these things, all the meanings that we put with it. Right. It made me realize that actually I'm becoming not an expert, but I have this treasure that I can tell other people who are going through the same thing, hey, it's really not that big of a deal, or hey, it's not, it's I have this new tool that I can help other people with because I've experienced it.
And that plays back to the growth and contribution piece you were talking about, because now you have something of value to contribute. So that actually does, your mistake has a value, or the thing you struggled with has a value because it's adding to other people. Yes. That's pretty awesome. So none of it's really wrong.
And it goes with what you told me when we first connected, which which is, and this is, I guess, a beautiful way to wrap this up, which how we each fit together like these puzzle pieces, which you mentioned in the beginning, and we're coming full circle right here. When we first connected offline after you sent me that second message, I was like, can I ask you a question? And you were like, yeah, because you said you were telling me that part of your job here is to help people come to understandings about themselves, like help people understand who they are, right? Help people understand what their role is. Is that what you were telling me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for all of us, what we're here to teach is the same thing we're here learning.
Right. Oh, yeah. We teach best what we most need to learn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so you were saying that. And so I was like, so what's my job? And you said your job is to share your insights, like download your insights and share them. And I was like, oh, that's what as you mentioned in the beginning, like, oh, I've always felt that that's something I should do, and I've always kind of been doing it, but never thought like that's my job, or that's what I have to give. And ever since we had that conversation, I've really been feeling the power in doing that and feeling like good about that contribution. And so it folds right back into this whole thing with the debt. It's like, again, like this is an insight that I get to share, and that's part of my purpose. And for you,
exactly.
And you are helping me come to that realization, and that's part of your purpose. So it all just fits together beautifully.
It does fold right back into it, and us sharing back and forth contributes to both of our ability to own our own power and gift and contribution, and it always feeds back into everything else, which is pretty awesome.
So awesome. I'm like super pumped right now. So thank you, Shae, for just everything, just sharing all of your insights. There's so many good nuggets in this episode. And I think it's been an hour. Let me see. Yep, it's been over an hour, and I actually can't believe it. So maybe we'll have to have you on another time to share more.
I'd love to babble anytime.
Yeah. Is there anything else before we sign off? Any last words?
Just rock being you, whoever's listening.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums it up.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Shae, and we will connect again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this week's episode. If you're a listener with a story to share and are interested in being featured on a future episode of this special series, you can email me at alexa@positivehead.com. Also, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear Brandon constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place we know of to do it. Period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Otherwise, tune in next Friday for another P-Head Posse episode. And until then, as Brandon always says, journey well.